When you look at a picture of our galaxy, it might seem like there are more stars in the Milky Way than we can ever possibly study. After all, every tiny pinprick of light is an object with its own size, brightness, and temperature. But astronomers have managed to catalog almost 100 million stars thanks to a classification method developed more than 100 years ago by a scientist named Annie Jump Cannon. The stars in the night sky may seem uncountable, but thanks to Cannon, we have cataloged millions of them. Annie Jump Cannon was born in the mid-1800s. As a young girl, she had a fascination with stargazing. After dark, she and her mother would crawl out onto the roof from their attic and look up at the stars together. Using an old textbook, Annie would identify the constellations she could see above her, watching them from her roof as they changed with the seasons. In her youth, Annie Jump Cannon got very sick, which caused her to lose her hearing completely. To communicate, she learned how to read lips. Cannon's love for the stars inspired her to go to school and study astronomy. She took classes at Wellesley and Radcliffe College, two schools for women near Boston. At Radcliffe, professors from the neighboring Harvard University would come to repeat their lectures for the female students, since women were not even allowed into the Harvard classrooms. Cannon continued to take special courses until she earned a master's degree and eventually became a teacher at Wellesley College. In 1896, Annie Jump Cannon was hired at the Harvard Observatory to analyze pictures of stars. Before we had modern computers, these pictures, taken through telescopes, had to be pored over by people with magnifying glasses. These scientists, called computers, were all women, many with degrees like Cannon in astronomy. However, because of their gender, they didn't have many jobs that were open to them, and they weren't paid much, only around 50 cents a day, which was a little more than what they could have made working at a factory. This group of women was responsible for many important scientific discoveries. The Harvard computers categorized hundreds of thousands of stars, developed methods to determine stellar size, and discovered a new way to calculate distances in space. While working as a computer, Annie Jump Cannon developed her new system for classifying stars, the same system we still use today. Cannon's method for categorizing stars is based on something called spectral classification. Scientists had noticed that when they looked at light coming from stars, there were always dark lines of color missing from the rainbows that they emit. This is because atoms and molecules can absorb light, leaving behind dark bands. And because different atoms and molecules have different sizes and structure, they actually absorb different colors or wavelengths of light. We call these dark bands missing from the rainbow spectral lines, and the pattern they produce can act as a kind of fingerprint that identifies which atoms are present in the star. Cannon looked at the spectral lines of the stars and noticed that the fingerprint for hydrogen, which we call the Balmer lines, was stronger for some stars and weaker for others. Depending on the strength of the lines, she could then classify the stars with a letter: O, B, A, F, G, K, and M. We now know that the reason the stars have lines that look different is because the stars are different temperatures. O stars are bright furnaces that burn very hot, and M stars are dwarf stars that are much cooler. Our sun is a G-type star, not too hot and not too cold. Cannon's classification system led to many important discoveries. For example, another astronomer named Cecilia Payne worked with Cannon and used her system to discover something very exciting about stellar composition. At the time, scientists thought that the stars were made up of the same stuff as Earth. But Cecilia Payne studied Cannon's spectral lines and discovered that they aren't made of heavy metallic elements, but instead are composed of the lightest gases, hydrogen and helium. This conclusion was so radical that it was rejected at first. It wasn't until years later that other scientists realized that Payne was right. Thanks to Cecilia Payne and Annie Jump Cannon, we now know what stars are made of. Annie Jump Cannon worked very hard to catalog the stars in the sky with her new system of spectral classification. Throughout her career, she classified almost 500,000 stars, many of which she discovered herself. She got so good at identifying stars that by the end of her career, she could classify 200 stars an hour, with just her eyes and a little help from a magnifying glass. So the next time you look up at the night sky and wonder just how many stars are out there, you can thank Annie, A-N-N, I-E, jump, J-U-M-P, Cannon, C-A-N-N-O-N. Thank you for dedicating your life to the answer.